Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. So as we continue our little journey through the Atari library and looking at a bunch of the different companies that made Atari 2600 games, we're coming on to one that was kind of weird to me. So we looked at Imagic, we looked at US Games, looked at 20th Century Fox, and we looked at games by Apollo, but now we come to CBS Electronics. And this was one, much like 20th Century Fox, that had a lot of backing to it and probably could have been more successful. We're going to be looking at CBS Electronics. CBS Electronics was part of the television company, CBS. They got their start when the parent company bought Gabriel Toys and started their own toy company, hence CBS Electronics. They also started the Colombia House Video Game Club, which was kind of a weird thing, at least for me, but it kind of furthered their ties to another company. CBS got into bed with Colecovision, so while making games for the Atari 2600, they also did stuff for Colecovision as well as with Intellivision. But it's through Colecovision that they were actually able to get a license to market the Colecovision in Europe, so they had the CBS Colecovision. So basically they were handling all of the international business for Colecovision. It was kind of a cool deal for them, but it ended up screwing them over once Coleco kind of went out of business. And through the Colombia House Video Game Club, they were also able to get the Coleco Gemini, so they licensed that, and it became the Colombia Home Arcade. This was basically an Atari 2600 clone. That's essentially all it was. It's kind of a cool story. I didn't really expect to be talking about hardware, though, so let's jump over to the games really quick, and we'll go over what games were released for the Atari 2600, and I'll talk a little bit about the ones that I got to work at least. So while the company was only around for 2 years, really 82 to 84, they managed to release almost 20 games, I think 18 or so from what I've read. They didn't get a lot of the huge arcade smashes. They had a lot of what are kind of like the B-plus games. They're not the A ones, they didn't necessarily get the Donkey Kong license, they didn't get Space Invaders, they didn't get any of the Atari games. They got sort of those other arcade games that you were like, oh yeah, that was a lot of fun to play. And they are. They're pretty fun to play, and honestly, the ports, or at least the ones that I got to work, are pretty good. So the games that I got to work were Gorf, Solar Fox, and Wizard of War. I unfortunately just couldn't get the other two that I had to work, and I couldn't find a lot of the other CBS games, or at least I couldn't get my hands on them in time to actually do this. So let's check out Gorf and Solar Fox and Wizard of War. So let's check out Gorf first. It was kind of an interesting game for me. It's a single screen space shooter. Nothing really special at first. It kind of plays like a Space Invaders clone. And it's a fairly decent one once you get through that first screen. Sorry for all the flickering and everything going on. But it really plays sort of like a greatest hits of every space shooter from the early 80s. While you're playing this, you've got scenes that are inspired by Space Invaders, as you see. You're going to have stuff that's inspired by Galaga. And it's a really fun game. At least it was while I was trying to play through the thing. I really enjoyed it. I have a lot of problems with it, at least with this port. But overall, it's a pretty fun game. So Gorf is an acronym. I can't remember what it's really for, and yeah, I don't really think it matters too much. Mostly when you play an arcade game, it's not really that big of a deal, whatever, there's no real need for a story or anything like that with these games. But this is a solid title. If I had been a kid at the time and I got this for Christmas, I would have been pretty happy. It does everything you would expect it to do. It's going to keep you entertained for however long you want to keep playing it, which is kind of all you need to ask for in a video game. Next we have Wizard of War, and this one was probably the most fun I had actually doing research on stuff, especially with the names of all the enemies, and how everything ends with war. It was very funny reading through all of that. The game is a lot of fun. It feels like it's a bit of a Berserk and kind of like a Pac-Man game, sort of, but not really. This feels like what the Alien game should have been, the one that was released by 20th Century Fox. This should have been that game. This was a lot of fun playing through. I kind of wish I had had a chance to play the arcade game. There was a lot of fun stuff in this. You're just trying to avoid and shoot the monsters. You're trying to deal with sometimes the flickering sprites, which are kind of annoying with the Atari. And then you get kind of like a boss fight, sort of. It's pretty cool. It slowly ramps up the difficulty like any good game should, and it's just kind of a lot of fun to play. This is one of the arcade games I don't really hear too much about, and that's kind of sums it up for a lot of what CBS's library was. They were games I never really heard about growing up. It was kind of like, these are also the arcade games. They're a lot of fun to play, but they're not the ones that you're really meant to remember or the ones that we don't really want to push. It's kind of weird like that. I don't really understand why. Now we get into Solar Fox, and this is the last game that I was able to get working. This one was kind of cool. I didn't really know what to make of it when I actually sat down and started playing it. I thought I was going to be playing a space shooter type thing, and instead this kind of felt like a free-roaming Pac-Man, which is a terrible way to describe it, I know, but that was just sort of the weird way it felt for me when I was playing it. You're collecting all these dots, you're dodging the two ships at either on the top or the bottom of the screen, and you don't really have a way to fight back against them that I could see. Maybe I just didn't get far enough in the game, which is very possible because, like a lot of these, I'm just not very good at it. But it was really fun to kind of play through this one. I actually played this more than the other two. I don't know what it was, but I was really enjoying myself while I was doing this. I also had Mountain King and also Omega Race, and I kind of wish I had a chance to get those working as well, but unfortunately I didn't. And when I was looking through a lot of the other games that at least were credited to CBS, some of them I'm a little confused by, especially since they had Donkey Kong on theirs, and I wasn't really aware that they did the ports for Donkey Kong. I thought that was done by someone else. But, whatever, maybe it got credited to them. But it seems like they had a lot of really solid games, and it's kind of weird that they weren't able to really translate that into something. I feel like they could have probably done more. They definitely had the financial backing from the TV network, so you would have thought they would have had a chance. But much like 20th Century Fox, they just kind of pulled the plug on it. I guess you could say that with US games as well, but US games did not have the same library that CBS had. When you look at the libraries for the games that I've played so far, I think Magic had the best, and then probably CBS next, and then Apollo there's a few spaces between Apollo and the next one, just in case I come across something, just like a piece of garbage laying on the road that can also be turned into a video game. That would probably be one step above Apollo games. So that's really going to wrap it up for CBS. They were a pretty cool company to look at. They did a lot of really interesting things. They ended up getting tied to Coleco, which probably didn't help them. They had some early success in 82 and part of 83, but once the crash hit, they were just kind of wiped out, and parent company pulled the plug on them, and that was kind of the end of it. Gabriel Toys ended up getting sold to Viewmaster. They were the people that made those little plastic like eye goggle things where you would slide something into and you could like move stuff around. It's kind of hard to describe the toy. I probably should put something in here about that, but whatever. From there, Viewmaster got sold to Mattel, so I'm guessing Mattel has the rights to whatever original properties CBS had, which I don't think were any. At least that didn't look like there were any. I only really found arcade ports. Maybe one or two were original IPs, but those are kind of lost to time at the moment. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up. CBS Electronics was kind of a fun company. It was interesting to look at. Cool that they got into hardware a little bit, even if it was just clones. But yeah, so that's going to wrap it up. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you have a company you want me to look at, just let me know and I'll see what I can do. Have a great day, everybody.